Welcome to Scarlet Vows, where stories of love, betrayal, and the journey of healing are retold with the truest emotions. Have you ever wondered what happens when the person you trust most becomes the one who betrays you the deepest? What would you do when the small world you've built over the years suddenly collapses in a single moment? Today, join me as we follow the journey of a woman who seemed fragile but stood up, fought back, and transformed her pain into strength, not only reclaiming justice for herself, but also rewriting her life with freedom, courage, and optimism. This isn't just a story of revenge. This is a journey of Chapter 1, The Peaceful Days. If anyone were to ask me about the best years of my life, I would answer without hesitation it was the time I spent with Kenneth in that little wooden house overlooking Moonrise Bay. Outsiders often praised us as the ideal couple, gentle, sweet, never raising our voices in argument, always sharing everything at home with mutual respect and simple care. Every morning, Kenneth would wake up before me and prepare a perfect cup of coffee, never too strong, a bit of fresh milk, and a sprinkle of cinnamon he jokingly called his secret weapon for loving his wife. I'd stay wrapped up in bed, lazily listening to the hum of the coffee grinder from the kitchen, completely at ease, knowing my day would always begin with his gentle affection. He'd always bring the coffee to our room, set it gently on my nightstand, and kiss my forehead. "Good morning, my girl," he'd say. On weekends, Kenneth often rode his bike along the bay while I spent time preparing lesson plans for my evening piano classes or wandering through the farmer's market for a bouquet of flowers, some fruit, or a handcrafted ceramic mug. Our life was simple, but never dull. Just a glance from Kenneth was enough to make me feel strangely safe. He wasn't the overly romantic or poetic type, but all his care was quiet and practical, like remembering I liked my coffee, slightly sweet, or fixing my wobbly piano bench without needing a reminder. There were evenings when the two of us just sat by the window, gazing at the distant sea dotted with lights, listening to a piece of classical music I'd chosen, or simply sharing a story about one of my little students who had just mastered their first Bach piece. Kenneth would listen attentively to everything I said, always smiling gently and giving my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. Sometimes I thought how lucky I was to love someone whose presence brought such peace every day. Many friends asked me what the secret to a happy marriage was. I never knew how to answer. I just thought it must be because Kenneth and I always knew how to give in, never letting small things create cracks in our relationship. We had overcome so many hardships together, from the years spent struggling to pay off our house, to my loss of a loved one, to Kenneth losing his job and having to start over at 35. And yet, each time we weathered a storm, I became more certain of my choice. I remember so clearly that Sunday morning, 7 years into our life together. Kenneth set the coffee on the table and softly asked, "Do you want to go out today, or just stay in and be lazy with me?" That familiar question made me smile with happiness because I knew that whatever I chose, by the end of the day, we'd be together. Just two ordinary people, but building a full and loving home side by side. In those moments, I could never have imagined that one day my entire world would be turned upside down. When trust has been built over 7 years, who could ever think that with just one afternoon, everything you believed to be solid could collapse? Chapter 2, Beneath the Calm Surface. There's something I only realized much later. Sometimes the smallest changes are what foretell the biggest storms in your life. But when you're living in a world of peace, it's hard to trust those vague feelings of unease. I was like that too, until everything changed. Lately, Kenneth had been busier than usual. He took on more projects at work, often working late or attending weekend meetings. He frequently mentioned one person, Angela Davidson, his direct supervisor and advisor on key projects. I remember him talking about Angela with a mix of admiration and anxiety. She's tough, but extremely smart and sharp. Working with Angela is stressful, but I learned so much from her. You know, I smiled to encourage him. You'll succeed. No one is as hardworking and dedicated as you. Kenneth just gave a faint smile, but I noticed him suddenly avoiding my gaze. Sometimes there was a fleeting exhaustion in his eyes or something else I couldn't quite name. As time went on, the nights when Kenneth came home late became more frequent. He said there were urgent projects that needed him to stay and work with Angela and the design team. I wasn't the type of wife to control my husband. In fact, I was even proud that my husband was hardworking and trusted by his boss. But honestly, there were moments I felt a pang of loneliness when the house was so quiet, with only my piano to comfort myself. Occasionally, Kenneth would bring home small gifts, a bouquet from the market, sometimes a box of French chocolates that I liked. He said it was to thank me for always supporting him because I was so wonderful, so patient. I just smiled, thinking those gifts were signs that our love was still intact. Little did I know it was the way someone feeling guilty tries to make up for a growing distance within themselves. It's not that I didn't notice the strange signs. The balance in our joint account seemed lower than before, even though I was still regularly paying in from my piano classes. There were some unfamiliar charges on the credit card dinners at upscale restaurants I'd never been to, hotel bills downtown, expensive gifts bought from a jewelry store. I had tried to explain everything away. Maybe Kenneth was entertaining clients or buying birthday presents for colleagues. I trusted him completely, so much so that I denied every instinct I had. One evening, I even asked gently, "You've been working so much lately, will I ever get to meet Angela? You talk about her so much. I'm curious about the person who's helped you grow in your career." Kenneth just forced a smile and changed the subject. "If the company ever throws a party, I'll introduce you. But honestly, she's pretty cold. Only likes talking about work." If it were anyone else, they might have sensed that avoidance clearly. But me, a wife who always wanted to believe in the good, still reassured myself that everything was fine, that I was just being overly sensitive, because I missed him. On nights when Kenneth came home late, I would often sit by the window, resting my hands on the piano keys, staring out at the city lights in the distance, and wondering, is happiness really as simple as I always thought? Or is there something lurking beneath that calm surface, something I just don't want to face? I didn't know that just a few days later, my faith would be tested in the most brutal way. Sometimes all it takes is a single moment for your entire world to shatter. Chapter 3, Congratulations, the fateful message. I still remember vividly the day everything began to fall apart. The same day, Kenneth shared the good news about a major turning point in his career. That morning, everything went on as usual. Kenneth woke up early to make coffee for me, his gentle smile and warm embrace, making me believe that no matter how stressful work became, at least we still had each other. He told me he'd be home late that night because he had to meet with his boss and that there might be news about the upcoming promotion review. I encouraged him, "You deserve that position. I truly believe it." Kenneth smiled, but this time there was something strange in his eyes, a mix of excitement and uncertainty. I spent the whole morning teaching my little students, my mind drifting between reality and thoughts about the Mediterranean trip we'd been dreaming of for 2 years. I was even browsing online for things to buy for the trip, and just as I was about to log into my bank account to check our balance, my phone buzzed with 2 messages in a row. I got promoted. There's a celebration dinner tonight with my boss and coworkers. I'll be late. Don't wait up. Love you. A minute later, there was an automatic transaction alert. A large sum withdrawn from our joint account with the note, "Deposit for Le Jardin restaurant." Something inside me trembled slightly. I reassured myself maybe they needed to put down a deposit for the celebration dinner. The company did have that tradition. But it felt strange, like an invisible string tightening around my chest. Maybe it was because I was used to managing every expense in our household, used to Kenneth's usual clarity and transparency. All afternoon, I tried to shake off the unease, throwing myself into teaching, cleaning the house, and sorting through old pieces of music I'd written for Kenneth over the years. In the evening, as I was preparing dinner, a thought suddenly struck me. Why not surprise him? I'll bring the special gift, the music portfolio I'd spent 3 weeks carefully hand copying, choosing the perfect leather cover just for the day Kenneth succeeded. That idea made me happy again. I got the gift and ready, put on the floral dress Kenneth liked best, did my makeup with extra care, and drove towards his company, bringing with me all the anticipation, trust, and pride of a wife who always believed she was her husband's greatest good fortune. The road to Davidson and Associates felt longer than usual that day. The headlights, the busy streets, I just wanted to get to Kenneth quickly to see his joy when he saw me and received this meaningful gift. But life sometimes chooses the most beautiful moments to strike the deepest blows. I didn't know that just a few minutes later, every illusion I had about our perfect marriage would be shattered, and what I witnessed at that office would change the rest of my life. Chapter 4, The Truth Behind the Glass Door. I remember every single step I took along the marble-tiled hallway on the 15th floor of Davidson and Associates. In my hand was a gift wrapped in silk paper, my heart fluttering with anticipation, half hopeful, half painfully naive. Sometimes I still see myself as a character in a movie about to appear in front of the man she loves, bringing him the most wonderful surprise of his life. When I reached the reception desk, the staff member looked at me with a strange expression, not the pleasant curiosity I was used to seeing whenever I visited the company with Kenneth, but something tinged with pity with unease. I introduced myself as Kenneth Walsh's wife here to congratulate him on his promotion. She hesitated for a moment, then pointed to the end of the hallway. "He's in Miss Davidson's office. Just go right in." On my way to the office, I ran into Jake, Kenneth's coworker, the one he always joked about as the gossip. Jake flashed me a rather mocking smile. "Here to congratulate the big boss," he said, glancing at the gift in my hands before looking away. I shivered for a second. Was I dressed oddly out of place in this world of black suits and white shirts? Or did everyone know something that I didn't? I stopped in front of the frosted glass door, etched with Angela Davidson, CEO. From inside, I heard laughter, Kenneth's voice mixed with a woman's. There was something in their tone that made me freeze. It wasn't the laughter of colleagues celebrating good news, but the kind of sound reserved for intimacy, for secrets kept from others. I raised my hand to knock, but my fingers felt frozen. I gently pushed the door open, and in an instant, everything shattered. The room was bathed in city sunset, the floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting two people locked in an embrace, my Kenneth in his immaculate sweat, holding Angela Davidson tightly by the window, their lips pressed together as if the world around them didn't exist. The portfolio of music I prepared for Kenneth slipped from my hand, falling onto the cold stone floor. I was paralyzed. I didn't scream. I didn't storm in or tear them apart like in the movies. I just stood there, turned to stone, watching everything I'd leaned on crumble in a heartbeat. Angela didn't rush to let go. She even looked at me triumphant, as if she'd won a long time ago. Kenneth pulled away, shock in his eyes, his mouth stammering, "Wendy, it's not what you think." But Angela's fingers, still smudged with red lipstick, answered for him. I turned away, each step heavy, my mind blank. The hallways seemed endless, and the people I passed looked at me as if they'd always known the truth, and I was the last to realize I'd been betrayed. When the elevator doors closed behind me, I knew from that moment on I was no longer the naive, fragile Wendy. I would not beg or plead. I would not let anyone define my worth with a stolen kiss behind a fancy glass door. I would rewrite my own fate with the same hands that once composed the most beautiful music for Kenneth. Chapter 5. When Tears Turned to Coal Fire. I can't even remember how I drove home, everything blurred behind a veil of tears that never quite fell. The little house by Moonrise Bay, once as peaceful as a gentle piece of music, now felt unfamiliar, cold to the bone. I used to think that if I ever found myself in this situation, I'd scream and cry, call my best friend, break down, and beg for an explanation. But in that moment, I did nothing. No crying, no shouting, only a gaping emptiness in my chest and a quiet, simmering thought. No one has the right to treat me like this. I wandered around the house looking at old keepsakes, the rose-patterned coffee cups, our wedding photos, the sheet music I once wrote for Kenneth. Every object reminded me of a love I'd believed was eternal. But then, the image of his hands and Angela's hair, of those lips, smeared with red lipstick, swept in again, turning every beautiful memory into a fresh wound. My phone rang again and again. It was Kenneth. Message after message. "Wendy, please pick up. I can explain." It was just a moment of weakness. "Come home, can we talk?" I just stared at the screen, not answering, not even once. I knew no explanation would matter now. An hour later, Angela messaged me too. Her words were cold, blunt, as if I was just a bystander in my own life. "You should talk honestly with Kenneth. Some things between you can't be fixed. Don't hurt yourself further." How ironic. The person who destroyed my happiness now pretended to pity me. That night, I sat by the window, looking out over the bay waves crashing gently in the dark. For the first time in 7 years of marriage, I thought about myself, not as Kenneth's wife, not as the kind piano teacher, but as Wendy, a woman, an artist, someone who had spent her youth believing in love and fidelity, only to be betrayed without mercy. I asked myself, if I endure, if I forgive, what will my life become? If I accept his apology, will I ever trust again? The answer rang clear in my heart. No. Suddenly, I felt a surge of hot blood in my veins. Pain gave way to a cold, fierce anger, a kind of strength I never knew I possessed. If Kenneth thought I was weak, he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. I opened my laptop, staring at the bank account numbers, at the money I'd meticulously saved from teaching, from wedding gigs, from nights spent composing music. I realized I was not weak, nor was I dependent, as he'd thought. That night I made a plan. Not to take revenge with tears, but to reclaim my dignity, my justice, to make Kenneth and his queen Angela pay for their arrogant betrayal. The next morning, I called a lawyer, a name I'd only seen in the papers, famous for handling the city's most ruthless high society divorces. From that moment on, the weak Wendy was gone. A new Wendy, cold and sharp, was rising from the ashes of betrayal. Chapter 6. The Counterattack. When an artist becomes the hunter. I don't know how many people have ever walked into Victoria Blackwood's law office with trembling hands and dry eyes like I did that morning. But I'm sure none of them understood the words starting over as deeply as I did in that moment. Victoria sat behind her imposing ebony desk, her gaze both cold and compassionate, the look of a woman who had witnessed far too many betrayals. "Do you want to cry?" Victoria asked, her tone steady. I couldn't help but give a small laugh. "I'm not here to cry. I'm here to win." That answer made the corners of her mouth lift slightly, a smile of someone who knows exactly whose side she's on. I told her everything, every detail, from Kenneth's sweet morning coffees to his anxious eyes whenever he mentioned Angela. And finally, the moment everything collapsed in that cold glass office at Davidson and Associates. I showed Victoria the messages, the bank transactions, even the sheet music, whose final note my trembling hand had finished that very morning. She listened like a judge, offering no shallow comfort, but analyzing with the calm of someone who's won more marital battles than I could imagine. "We don't just need a divorce. We need justice, and sometimes justice means paying the price," Victoria said, and began sketching out a strategy like a general preparing for war. First was finances. I gave Victoria every detail income, from teaching, from wedding performances, even the private savings Kenneth never knew about. She brought in a forensic accountant to break down every cent Kenneth had secretly used for his late-night work, romantic dinners with Angela, and business trips that were really disguised couple getaways. I discovered that over 60% of our joint money came from my music lessons, the same ones Kenneth had dismissed as a childish hobby. Worse, he'd used that very money to invest in his new relationship. Next was evidence of the affair. Victoria guided me to collect every trace: hotel receipts, emails, anonymous messages from co-workers, even recordings sent by a company accountant. The cruel words of Kenneth and Angela played over the speakerphone. Wendy is so hopelessly naive. Her money became ours without her even knowing. Let her handle all the finances. I'll just focus on my own future. Victoria smirked. They're handing us everything we need to win. The more I listened, the less it hurt. In its place was a strange clarity, like a conductor before an orchestra, certain she's about to lead the final movement of her old life symphony. The plan was drawn up in detail. Block every credit card Kenneth was using. Change all house locks and online passwords, turning Kenneth into a true stranger right in the home he once called his own. Betrayal. Prepare to file for divorce with full financial and adultery evidence alongside claims for damages to my reputation and assets. Schedule a meeting with the Davidson and Associates Board to expose Angela and Kenneth's breach of company ethics and misuse of company funds for personal affairs. You won't just be the woman who was betrayed, Victoria said quietly. You'll be the woman Kenneth and Angela will never forget as long as they live. I knew I had chosen the right ally. That night I looked at myself in the mirror, touching the pale line where my wedding ring had been since the moment I learned the truth. For the first time in years, I saw a new Wendy, eyes determined no longer waiting for anyone's pity. Only a cold resolve remained and pain forged into steel. A new song was beginning, and I knew I would be the one to write the final note for Kenneth. Chapter 7. When the Truth is Exposed. The Symphony of Justice. Perhaps every revenge plan would remain just a private game if fate hadn't sent Sophie Martinez to me on a gloomy Wednesday morning. I received an email from an unfamiliar name. There's something you need to know. If it had been me just a month before, I might have hesitated. But the woman I'd become simply clicked open, as if accepting a new chapter was already waiting to begin. Sophie appeared at the Seaside Café Petite, her sharp eyes hidden behind glasses. She sat down and took an envelope from her bag, packed with what looked like random items, dinner receipts for 2 confirmation forms for conference, hotel bookings, even covert recordings of meetings I was never meant to hear. Ms. Wendy, I'm not doing this out of jealousy or spite toward Kenneth or Angela. Sophie said, her hand trembling around her coffee cup. My own sister was betrayed. Once I know exactly what that feels like. You deserve to know the whole truth. I didn't say anything. I let Sophie lay out the evidence, listened to every cutting word Kenneth and Angela had carelessly spoken about me, about the naive artist fumbling with her piano about the money I earned, being just enough for Kenneth's pocket change, about their plan for a clean breakup, as soon as Kenneth landed his promotion. Nothing was truly surprising, but the feeling of being stripped bare still made it hard to breathe. The only thing that kept my tears at bay was a growing mixture of anger and contempt in my chest. Sophie didn't just bring the truth, she delivered the decisive blow. She helped me reconstruct the timeline for every one of Kenneth's late-night meetings, every unusual expense from our joint account, all the restaurant bills, airline tickets, and the gym membership Angela had signed up for the same week as Kenneth. Everything was arranged like a multi-movement symphony, waiting only for its final crescendo. That evening, I brought the whole stack of evidence to Victoria Blackwood. She flipped through each page, her eyes lighting up as if finding the missing piece of a perfect puzzle. This isn't just infidelity, Victoria concluded. This is systematic financial fraud, a breach of professional ethics, and best of all, they signed their names to every single thing. Victoria immediately assigned her assistant to investigate Davidson and Associates internally. Her legal team contacted the company's HR department, submitting the full set of evidence, irregular spending, audio recordings, screenshots of emails emphasizing the violation of company ethics, especially between a supervisor and a subordinate. The next day, I got a call from the board of Davidson and Associates asking me to come in for a private meeting to discuss serious complaints regarding Kenneth Walsh and Angela Davidson. I walked into that meeting as a true warrior. For the first time, I wasn't passive, wasn't Kenneth's wife. I was the one holding all the truth and the law in my hands. The board, the risk management team, HR, and the company's legal department were all there listening as I laid out every detail. Victoria had prepared all the documents, organized, and delivered them with the sharpness and logic of a court indictment. No one interrupted me. No one defended Kenneth and Angela. All I saw were furrowed brows, frantic note-taking, and the cold eyes of people who knew this was a scandal that could blow up their entire careers. After that meeting, Davidson and Associates immediately suspended Kenneth and Angela pending an internal investigation, promising full support for my divorce proceedings. From then on, I understood what it feels like to be a woman who demands justice. It's not just about winning, but about finally seeing the truth, no more hiding behind dazzling masks. I returned home with a light heart. For the first time in so many days, I made myself a hot cup of coffee, sat by the window overlooking the bay, and felt my heartbeat return to a steady, peaceful rhythm. Kenneth thought he could bury me beneath his lies, but that arrogance made me the one to unmask it all, to reclaim justice for myself and for anyone who's ever been betrayed or belittled like I was. I was no longer the one left behind. I had made myself the author of my own ending with the pride and strength they once underestimated. Chapter 8, The Unmasking Party, When the Betrayer Pays in Front of the World. If anyone ever said the sweetest revenge is the one carried out in silence, I'd prove the opposite sometimes. Justice needs an audience, a stage, and as many witnesses as possible. No one understood this better than Victoria Blackwood. She chose the very day Kenneth was to present the biggest project of his career at Davidson and Associates to orchestrate my ceremony of revenge right in front of dozens of major clients, shareholders, colleagues, and the entire company leadership. That morning, I wore the navy dress Kenneth once said made me look so smart, put on my mother's pearl earrings, and walked into the glass building with a sense of calm I'd never known before. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't angry anymore. All of that was in the past, and now I was here to put a final period on their entire charade. Just before we entered the main conference room, Victoria reminded me once more. Don't just demand justice for yourself. Make sure they can never lift their heads anywhere ever again. The room was packed, spotlights focused on the stage, where Kenneth in a dark gray suit stood confidently next to Angela, her expensive dress making her shine like a queen. The presentation on green architecture building a sustainable future echoed over the speakers. The two stood side by side, playing the perfect couple in the script they'd written for themselves. As the Q&A wrapped up, Victoria signaled for the legal file server to step forward. Amidst thunderous applause, he strode up to Kenneth, holding aloft a thick folder, and announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Kenneth Walsh, you are being served for financial fraud, marital misconduct, and misappropriation of marital assets for personal use. This is an official summons." The room fell silent. Everyone who had once laughed with or trusted Kenneth turned to look at him with utter shock, and then they looked at me. I stood up. Right as every eye landed on me, I spoke slowly, clearly. This is for all the years of being underestimated. This is for every lie, every time you used me to build a future with someone else. And this is for every woman who's ever been belittled, ever been betrayed and forced into silence. Today, I'm giving it all back, right in front of those who once admired you. Most, Angela was called next-handed an internal investigation order from the company leadership and immediately suspended. I looked at Kenneth, the man who thought himself too clever to ever be caught. Now sitting frozen, pale, his colleagues backing away, the leadership nodding in confirmation of his termination. For the next few minutes, the conference room became a scandal stage. Everyone gossiped, took pictures, recorded videos. Messages spread like wildfire through every internal group, and in just minutes, everyone knew the star couple had made mistakes they could never undo. Victoria came up, gently placed a hand on my shoulder, and said, "You just did something very few people have the courage to do publicly, unmasking their lies in front of their whole world. You should be proud of yourself." Leaving that room, I felt no heaviness or bitterness. I knew from this moment on, no lie would ever control my life again. I was free, strong, and more at peace than I'd ever been. And the price Kenneth paid wasn't just losing his career, it was losing the admiration of those who once believed in him the most, a price that no amount of money could ever buy back. Chapter 9, Reconstruction, When True Freedom Begins. After everything, someone once asked me, "What's the hardest thing about leaving a betrayer behind?" I used to think it was the pain, the loss, or the sense of betrayal. But in truth, the hardest thing is learning how to live without fear. Because for so many years I'd been used to controlling my emotions, worrying every time Kenneth came home late, analyzing every word, every glance, just to hold on to an illusion I didn't even want to believe in. In the first days after the public unmasking, I thought I would break down. But in reality, I didn't. Strangely enough, when everything hit rock bottom, I actually felt the lightest. I cleaned out the old house, threw away everything tied to the past. Kenneth's abandoned suits, those fake love letters, our old photos all went into the trash without an ounce of regret. I converted the living room into a piano studio flooded with sunlight, laughter from new students, and much brighter music. My teaching schedule was packed, and the number of students soared after my story spread through our little community in Moonrise Bay. People no longer looked at me with pity, but with admiration for being a woman who stood up, who dared to protect herself, who turned loss into strength. Every evening, I'd sit by the window, looking out at the sea, no longer thinking of Kenneth. What he left behind was simply an expensive lesson. That real love isn't about holding onto someone unworthy, but about learning to love and respect yourself. I spent time walking along the beach, getting to know new friends, former students' parents, neighbors, even the owner of the little bookstore at the end of the street. Every conversation was a new step forward. Every composition was a new mark of freedom. The settlement money and my savings allowed me to renovate the house, invest in a small recording studio, and buy a grand piano, something I'd only dreamed of when I was Kenneth's shadow. Only then did I realize the greatest freedom is living true to your feelings, your passions, your real self. Sometimes I'd hear rumors about Kenneth that he'd been fired from Davidson and Associates, that Angela had quietly left the city, and that no one mentioned their names at any gatherings anymore. But to me, they were nothing but two shadows behind the curtain of my new life, no longer holding any power to hurt me again. And unexpectedly, just when I'd given up on love, I met James, the owner of the little bookstore, a kindred spirit, someone who truly listened to the music I poured my heart into. He never asked about the past, never pried into old scars. We spent hours together talking about poetry, music, and the little genuine things in life. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in years, I'm no longer afraid. I dare to dream, to love again, but this time to love myself, to love the strength I forged in my darkest days. Most of all, I am grateful to myself for not breaking, not compromising, not backing down. A new life, a life of freedom, authenticity, and music has finally begun. Chapter 10, Epilogue, Strong Enough to be Truly Loved. If someone were to ask me if I have any regrets, my answer would be no, not even a little. I don't regret the years I spent with Kenneth, nor do I regret the tears I shed when I discovered it was all a lie. Because without those dark days, I would never have discovered how strong I could truly be. The story of Kenneth and Angela quickly became a legend. In the city's architecture circles a cautionary tale for anyone who thinks they can outsmart everyone. They lost everything: their jobs, their reputations, the social connections they once prided themselves on. Davidson and Associates quietly issued apologies to clients, trying to erase any trace of the scandal. I didn't need to do anything more because life and society themselves taught Kenneth and Angela the price of betrayal. As for me, the woman once seen as the shadow, the one who only lived for others, I became a respected name in my little community. My piano students performed better than ever. Every concert at my new studio was packed. Parents and neighbors came, applauded, encouraged me, and gave me a true sense of belonging and appreciation. James the gentle man among the bookshelves became an important part of my new life. Nothing rushed, nothing loud. Our love grew each day like a gentle but vibrant melody. He never asked about Kenneth, never brought up the past. James loves the woman I am now, a Wendy who knows pain, who knows how to stand up, and who has learned to forgive herself. I realize that sometimes the happiest ending is not going back to an ex, nor is it about ultimate revenge, but about learning to forgive, not the betrayer, but yourself. Forgive the naive years, forgive the youthful mistakes, and forgive the times you believed love only required patience. My new life is free of secrets, free of fear every time the phone rings late at night, free of anxiety over a glance or a stray comment. I dare to say no, dare to refuse, dare to put myself above all expectations and pressures. I do what I love, composing music, teaching, traveling, even accepting invitations to perform in other cities. Once, after performing at a local arts festival, a middle-aged woman came up to shake my hand and said, "Your story inspired me. Because of you, I dared to leave my toxic husband and start over." In that moment, I understood that true strength isn't in noisy acts of revenge, but in quietly living better every day, making your existence the clearest evidence of the failure of those who tried to hurt you. Now every morning as I wake beside the sunlit window, I am grateful for the old upheavals that brought me to today. I no longer live to please anyone, nor do I need anyone to define my worth. I just need to be a Wendy who is free, sincere, and strong enough to be loved, not by anyone else, but by myself. If you're listening to this story, if you've ever felt hopeless or betrayed, remember, you always have the right to start over. You deserve true love. And most importantly, you are so much stronger than you think. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story on Scarlet Vows. If you've ever experienced the pain of betrayal, or if you're standing at a crossroads in your life, I hope today's story gives you new hope that every painful ending can open the door to a brighter beginning, that you are strong enough to weather any storm, and that you truly deserve to be loved, not by anyone else, but by yourself. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit subscribe, share this video with anyone who needs the strength to move forward, and follow Scarlet Vows so you never miss another powerful, inspiring story about love, forgiveness, and resilience. Wishing you the strength to live the life you truly want. See you in the next video. You in